Most of our experience with teams is through face-to-face interactions. However, increasingly, we are engaging in virtual teamwork where technology is used for communication and team processes. There are various technologies available for virtual teams. The use of technologies by teams changes how people interact and the dynamics of the group process. Virtual teams offer both benefits and challenges. The available technologies are still evolving, and teams are learning how to select, use, and adapt them to meet their needs. Changes in technology and how it is used may improve the effectiveness of the virtual teams in the future. We are going to explore virtual teams in Chapter 15. A virtual team is any team whose member interactions are mediated by time, distance, and technology. Communication technologies such as email and video conferencing help teams share information, while collaboration technologies like group support systems help teams solve problems, make decisions, and work together. The use of technology by teams relates to the availability of technology and the operational skills required, the tasks the team needs to perform, and the norms for the use of technology. Although we talk about virtual teams as technology dependent with a lack of collation, many teams that are collated rely heavily on technology for communication and still use face-to-face meetings for team interactions. Most large companies use virtual teams to some degree, and many use technology to support these activities. International surveys reveal that 46% of all organizations use virtual teams, and in a subset of that sample, 66% of multinational organizations use virtual teams in the workplace. Communication technologies have widespread effects on organizations. Technology directly affects work design, organizational design, and communication patterns, as well as secondary social effects caused by the reduced social cues in the messages. The primary goals of virtual teams are to improve task performance, overcome the constraints of time and space, and increase the range and speed to access to information. These goals are related to the direct effects of technology. The impact of technology on teams varies with cultural and age differences. Younger team members may prefer using texting and social media, while older team members may prefer face-to-face or telephone communication. Communicating via technology may add to cultural miscommunications because of the lack of nonverbal cues in an email or even a video conference. Whether meetings are synchronous or not is another aspect that influences interactions of team members. Synchronous media are things such as face-to-face communication, teleconference, video conference that allows for real-time and concurrent participation by all team members, and it also allows for immediate feedback. Asynchronous media, for example, emails and chat messages, involve temporal gaps in responses, less immediate feedback, and lack of concurrent participation. There are various types of communication technology that aids in meetings. They're displayed in table 15.1. We have same time, same place, or STSP meetings. These are traditional face-to-face team meetings. Even when a team primarily interacts via technology, there is a value to face-to-face meetings. These are especially important when the team is formed to help establish social relations. Technology does have an impact on team meetings. Group decision support systems help structure meetings, especially for activities such as brainstorming and voting. Same time, different place meetings are distributed meetings in which team members interact through a combination of audio, video, or text. Although video conferencing is the most popular image of STDP technology, it is not necessarily the most useful technology. Electronic meeting systems provide audio with shared data. Participants often prefer being able to manipulate data and images related to the task rather than focusing on the images of the participants. Different time, same place, or DTSP meetings are useful for work teams that exist across different shifts or for team members who travel frequently and telecommute. The information technology serves as a storage system so members can pass on information as needed. Project management and other software systems create a framework for noting the status of the project. Different time, different place meetings are those in which team members share the same virtual space on a website. Technologies such as online bulletin boards, chat rooms, and databases help support a team's operations. This allows team members to participate in the team process whenever and wherever the opportunity arises. The members of virtual groups are anonymous. This leads to what psychologists call de-individuation, which is a loss of self-awareness and evaluation apprehension caused by feeling anonymous. It has a number of negative social effects. For example, people are more likely to engage in social loafing in teams when they feel anonymous. One of the impacts of anonymity on virtual teams is that people are more willing to say things they would not say to face-to-face interactions. This is why flaming, which is uninhibited negative remarks, occurs in electronic bulletin boards and emails. Although flaming and other types of disinhibited emotional communication occur in lab studies, it is not a typical problem with work teams that are less anonymous. Most virtual teams develop communication norms that regulate emotional communications. Being anonymous creates less pressure to conform in virtual teams. Lack of social pressure affects how teams manage conflict and make decisions. Virtual teams often have higher levels of conflict and are less able to resolve conflicts and reach a consensus in decision-making situations. These effects are partially due to the lack of social pressure that would normally increase people's willingness to agree and seek compromises during disagreements. There are also positive impacts of virtual teams because of the increased anonymity. When anonymous group support systems are used to generate ideas for problem solving and decision making, team members are more willing to participate and generate more ideas. Electronic brainstorming generates more creative ideas than face-to-face brainstorming. Virtual teams often have increased conflict because of misunderstandings and reduced communication. These communication problems increase the emotional frustration of people working in virtual teams. This is one reason why the effectiveness and member satisfaction of virtual teams is positively related to the level of personal communications among team members. Many of these problems go away as teams learn how to interpret communications from other team members. Virtual teams have difficulty establishing and maintaining mutual knowledge. They lack contextual clues during communications, and this leaves members less certain about the people with whom they are interacting, unsure of how the message is being conveyed, and unclear as to whether the communication is successful. It is more difficult to know whether fellow members of virtual teams have adequately understood a communication. Facial cues and nonverbal feedback reduce the uncertainty one feels with communication. Without this information, inaccuracies and confusion can occur that reduce team performance. Miscommunication using technology can cause people to make faulty assumptions about the characteristics of the communicator. This misinterpretation can be especially important when the teams communicate across cultures. The problems of miscommunication also occur in video conferencing. When people are video conferencing, they can be multitasking outside of the other person's view. It does not require the full attention that face-to-face interaction requires. Although you can still see each other, you cannot make eye contact. It does not have the interactive quality of a face-to-face communication because of the limited nonverbal cues. Although there are some advantages of video conferencing over the telephone, it mainly just matches the face to a name and is not the best medium for reading verbal clues. Communication through media can also distort some patterns of communication. For example, poor audio quality over phone or video conferencing may distort accents and make communication more difficult for other members to understand, while these distortions may be alleviated through nonverbal channels like email or text. Indeed, those who are socially anxious or are non-native speakers of a language may prefer to express themselves non-verbally through text-based email or forums. With experience, many virtual teams overcome their communication problems and operate as effectively as face-to-face teams. This is due to the development of social relations that help interpret the communications from other team members and the use of communication norms that improve team communications. The use of email, video conferencing, and other communication technologies have led to a number of etiquette errors caused by lack of established communication norms. Senders of email messages often treat them like telephone calls, that is, as informal, private, and no-record messages. The receivers, however, may treat them as letters. That means they view them as formal and public messages that can be copied and redistributed. Senders are often shocked and sometimes embarrassed when their private email messages are distributed to others. New users often show bad form by distributing junk news to people who do not care about it, writing overlong messages, or trying to be funny. Emotions are difficult for people to put in writing. In email messages, emotions seem to get out of control easily, and interpersonal conflicts may arise that are primarily due to miscommunication. The solution is the development of communication norms for the technology. Communication norms can help both high and low virtual teams. Email norms identify when email should be used to communicate, how the message should be constructed, timeliness of responses, and who should receive the messages. For example, a team may have a rule limiting the size of email messages or a rule controlling the use of distribution lists. Norms also identify when not to use email. To limit conflicts, one important norm is to never send an email when you are upset or in an emotional state. Email should not be used to resolve interpersonal issues or to avoid personal interactions. From an individual's perspective, the advantages of virtual teams include flexibility, control over time, and empowerment of team members. However, there are disadvantages such as isolation, decreased interpersonal conflict, and increased communication and conflict. Overall, the performance of face-to-face and virtual teams is fairly similar. This is especially true if experienced users are being studied. Many of the disadvantages of virtual teams diminish when teams have time to adjust to using the technology. Virtual teams have several problems that are greater than face-to-face teams. Trust is more important in the operation of virtual teams and yet more difficult to create. Building social relations among team members is more difficult. Conflicts are more difficult to detect and harder to resolve in virtual teams. People are less likely to be satisfied working in a virtual group than in a face-to-face group. They may feel a lack of social support, and they may experience increased stress when working in a virtual team. Some of these negative effects are likely to disappear over time. Virtual work teams improve as they become more accustomed to using the technology, develop group norms for working together, and develop social relations that improve communication. Virtual teams have a difficult time developing social relations and team cohesion. Members of virtual teams are more anonymous, which leads to a weaker relational ties and less team identification. Because of the limited ability to convey emotions via technology, it is more difficult for virtual teams to develop trust among members. Even in video conferencing, the reduced emotional and social information impedes understanding the meaning of other team members' communication. This limits the development of trust. Virtual teams tend to be task-focused and often do not spend enough time on the social communications that are necessary for the development of trust and team cohesion. Teams that have already developed good social relations may be more effective working in virtual teams. Occasional face-to-face meetings are needed to develop and support the social relations among members. When team members have never met personally, they are less effective using communication technology for difficult problems because they have not developed the ability to, quote, read the emotional meanings of member communications. It is essential to take a life cycle approach to understanding the social impacts of using virtual teams. The impact of technology varies depending on the stage of the team. When new teams are created, a face-to-face meeting is important for team members to get acquainted with one another, as we mentioned on the previous slide. It is also important to clarify the team goals and member roles and develop norms for operation. Virtual teams encounter a number of team maintenance problems. For instance, it may be more difficult to motivate virtual teams and control social loafing. It's more difficult to create trust among members and develop team cohesion and identification. Because of this, member satisfaction in virtual teams depends on the opportunities to meet face-to-face and exchange non-work related personal information. The standard approaches to team leadership may not be effective in overcoming these barriers to team performance. Leaders do not have the option to easily monitor and supervise team members of virtual teams. Consequently, virtual teams need to focus on empowering individual team members to perform. Higher performing virtual teams have members that display more leadership behaviors, especially behaviors relating to keeping track of the team's work and performance. Leaders of virtual teams also need to take a more active role in developing the social aspects of teamwork. One of the problems with virtual teams is developing and maintaining social relations. Often, virtual team meetings are entirely focused on communicating task-related information. Periodic face-to-face meetings that include social activities are helpful for building social relations. In addition, team members can be encouraged to informally communicate with each other on a regular basis using technology. Maintaining social ties using information technology is an appropriate business use of technology. Cross-cultural communication problems are more likely in a virtual team because virtual teams are often used to connect team members in different countries. Culturally heterogeneous virtual teams tend to experience more conflict and lower levels of cohesion and satisfaction compared to culturally homogeneous groups. However, the negative effects of culture were attenuated when team members only had short-term projects. This suggests that the negative effects of culturally diverse teams may not be present at the beginning of a team, but emerge later on. Additionally, norms of emotional display can differ between culturally heterogeneous and homogeneous teams. One study shows that culturally diverse teams tend to display more positive emotions and suppress negative emotions compared to culturally homogeneous teams. It is a challenge to develop trust in a virtual team. Trust is often developed through social relations, but this is difficult to do in a virtual team. Additionally, virtual teams may be particularly prone to subgrouping, leading to in-group favoritism and out-group discrimination in the form of biased information sharing and conflict between subgroups. Trust in virtual teams is often based on meeting performance expectations, primarily from early team experiences. Team leaders can encourage trust by dividing the project into defined tasks, establishing clear performance expectations, and monitoring their completion. Periodic meetings that review performance help ensure that team members remain trustworthy. Additionally, encouraging a supportive communication climate and fostering psychological safety have been shown to overcome many of the barriers of virtual interaction. There are a number of strategies for improving the operation of virtual teams, including more time to deal with problems, face-to-face initial meetings, the use of communication channels, development of operating structures and communication norms, better training, and appropriate leadership. These strategies deal with communication problems by better managing the task and creating alternative communication opportunities to improve social relations. Developing trust among team members is the foundation for both task and social communication in virtual teams. Virtual teams follow a developmental process similar to other types of teams. In the early stages of team development in virtual teams, the objective is to develop a structure that allows the team to operate effectively later. This includes clarifying roles and responsibilities and establishing trust among team members. The developmental sequence in virtual teams is to create a sense of belonging to the team, which encourages commitment to the team's goals, which then helps to develop trust among team members. This sequence sets the stage for later team performance. The effects of leadership on virtual teams is important because these teams have challenges that make leading them more difficult than face-to-face teams. Virtual teams start with lower levels of cohesion and trust among members. They often do not have a shared set of norms and work procedures. Since they are located in different places, it is more difficult for team members to view themselves as part of a team. Technology constraints on communication create confusion about task work and limit development of social relations. Virtual teams will evolve in the future because of changes in technology, the characteristics of new employees, and the development of new types of social interaction. New technologies, such as project management software and discussion forums, could help improve coordination of tasks and teams. Most of the research on Groupware, which is the software and technology that supports teams, examines email and video conferencing. Unfortunately, up to now, group work development focuses on technology issues rather than group dynamics. As a result, it is primarily individual communication technology that has been adapted for use by teams rather than a technology designed to deal with specific team issues. One option for the future of virtual teams is the development of virtual reality environments for teams. Virtual reality can be used to create a team environment where team members can meet in a virtual space. This creates a rich media environment for interacting. Research on simulation-based training shows that it can create a sense of involvement, immersion, and presence. This technology may help compensate for the reduced personal experience in virtual teams. The new generation of worker is more comfortable using a variety of communication technologies and more comfortable forming and maintaining social relationships via technology. From childhood, they have established social relations through communication technologies, such as online gaming and internet pen pals. They frequently use cell phones and instant messaging for maintaining social connections. Consequently, the younger generation should have less trouble in virtual teams forming social relations and developing trust compared to the older generation. One of the problems with virtual teams is the lack of informal interactions. It is the informal interactions and chance encounters of daily work life that help build interpersonal relationships and create a solid team identity. The use of more informal and social communication technologies may help deal with this problem. Instant messaging, chat rooms, and other informal communications technologies can allow team members to share their work experience. Facebook and other social network technologies can help create a social identity for the team. The simple act of sharing photos by team members can help develop social connections within virtual teams. Creating team connections via instant messaging or chat rooms can help stimulate the informal social interactions of teams. When chat room connections are kept open, teams create a virtual environment that is similar to a physical work environment where casual conversations can occur at any time. Users of instant messaging often adopt an informal communication style that is rather similar to social conversation in person. It leads to briefer communications that are more informal and that occur more often, which is similar to the informal communications that occur in brick and mortar work environments. This concludes Chapter 15 on virtual teams. Please let me know if you have any questions.